Change is difficult. I'm just warning you ahead of time. Everybody comes to school with their own set of preconceived notions about what education should look like. That includes students. Students have their own notions, and students have their own culture. In some cases, students have significant cultural and linguistic differences from those of the educators that are in their classrooms. Over the next semester, we're going to examine those differences and see how technology can help us to mediate those differences, appreciate them, and to meet each child where they truly are. Think for a second about a time when you entered a new situation where you didn't know anybody in a room. You could have even been an adult. It was probably pretty intimidating. Now think about a student who enters a school and doesn't even know the native language. Well, that can prove to be an enormous hurdle for that student. It's not simply a linguistic difference that they have, but an entire set of cultural differences that they have to deal with how students dress, different social norms, behaviors, and what's acceptable to the educators in that school. And culture is not limited to specific and traditional cultural groups as we think of it. There's an entire culture around technology. Some of you, I'm sure, are afraid of using technology with its rapid growth and how often students seem to be comfortable using it. But as educators, we have an obligation to use the most recent and researched methods for helping our students learn and achieve. When integrated properly, technology can shift the focus from the teacher to the learner in the classroom, an idea that is central to the communicative language teaching theory. As we go through this next semester and we talk about ways that we can change and shift our teaching practices, there's a really important idea that we need to remember at all times, and that is that technology is not our focus. Technology is a tool, and it's a great tool, and it helps us tremendously. But we are focused on teaching and on learning. And we need to change and shift our practices away from some of the traditional ideas of education. We need to put the learner at the center of all of our ideas. Technology is a great tool, and I liken it to athletics. If you think about how much more modern athletes have achieved compared to athletes from decades ago, they have made leaps and bounds, but it's not because they have better shoes or a better diet. It's a cumulative effort of using all of those tools together. We have more scientific knowledge. We have better training regimens. We know better about the mind and nutrition and materials to use for athletics. We use all of those tools. But if athletes simply focuses on what kind of shoes they're going to wear without putting in the hard work and the hard effort, the education really, then no change is possible. The same goes for the classroom. In order to use the amazing tools that are available to us, you have to use them. That sounds simple. But you have to not be afraid. When you look at students and children today, they've grown up with technology. They use it all the time. It comes very natural to them. I always tell teachers, if there was a giant red button on the wall, kids would run up and push it. Teachers would ask, what's that going to do? What's that going to blow up? Well, you need to be very careful, and you need to keep safety concerns in mind. Go ahead and push the button. If you're on your phone or on your Chromebook or your laptop, poke around, click things. Almost everything that you're going to do can be reversed. So if you make a mistake, it's no big deal. And that's the biggest first step to being able to use the modern tech tools to help our modern learners. Think for a second about what kinds of bias you hold within yourself. It's not a bad thing. Everybody has it. I recently had jury duty, and the judge explained to us that when considering us as jurors, you have to consider what kind of bias people hold, and that's why they ask us questions. We all come into this world, have our own different experiences that shape us and form our different thoughts and beliefs. As educators, there's a really important idea that we have to think about, reflect on, and really examine, and that's cultural deficit theory, which is the idea that trying to explain the underachievement of some minority students by blaming their family life and their cultural beliefs. This is a difficult concept to think about, and we're going to look at some situations. One very simple idea that I think about is the way that we treat language with students who are really children. If a student asks, "Can I go to the bathroom?" do we insist that they say, "May I go to the bathroom?" When in the real world, can and may are basically acceptable either way because it's understood what the person's trying to say. In science class, we often want 13 and 14-year-olds to learn really technical and precise scientific language. But really we, in the end, need to foster a love of that subject matter, not hammer away at complex and overly complex scientific language. Related to this idea of over-stressing accuracy, we're going to talk about modern pedagogical approaches to teaching and learning a foreign language, and that is communicative language teaching. There's an idea there, first, that you shift the focus away from the teacher to the learner, and one of the ideas is to focus on fluency over accuracy. When I learned a foreign language, it was a very traditional approach. There's a lot of rote memorization, conjugating verbs, recitation, whole class. In modern day foreign language classes, it shifts it back to the learner, doesn't give them all of the information, and the focus on getting them to be fluent, to be able to actually communicate with that language, not necessarily to get every word correct. Part of dealing with culture is dealing with different socioeconomic groups. One of the modern issues related to technology within schools and within families is the digital divide, which is the idea that there are the haves and the have-nots when it comes to modern technology. This is still an issue for a lot of people in our country and around the world, but thankfully, due to technology rapidly increasing and costs coming down, a great percentage of people in the world have some access to digital devices, especially mobile technologies. Over 90% of people are said to have access to at least a cell phone. The real difference comes in now is that most families have access, but the haves and have-nots are families who have access to multiple devices and higher speed internet, and the have-nots might have only one computer to share amongst all the children and the parents, and they might have lower speed internet. So there are differences, and as educators we need to address those differences and account for them and make sure if we're using technology and we expect students to use it, that we provide accommodations for those kids, whether it be extra time set aside, helping with providing extra devices, or extra access through the school or the local library. As I mentioned before, mobile technology is on the rise. Students are growing up with this technology. In some cases, they come into our classrooms and their cell phones are like an extension of their own body. That may not be so true for the educators in classrooms, but it is imperative that educators embrace cell phones and mobile technology and harness the power it has for the good of education. That doesn't mean that anything goes. Rules should be set, expectations should be clear, and devices shouldn't be used at all times. But if they're used for positive, You can increase the achievement of students, and you can teach them that the devices can be used for good purposes. Not all devices are used for the good. And that's why it's important to discuss safety with your students and to be aware of the pitfalls and the perils of using technology in the classroom. While I generally advocate being very wide open, giving students as much access as possible, it is very, very important to make sure that you are covering all of your bases and knowing exactly what is going on within your classroom. When students have access to technology, they have access to the entire world. Unfortunately, the entire world is not always a great place. Students can access things that they should never see in school. Students can post things publicly that schools wouldn't want posted. And so it's important to monitor, but it's more important to teach students about what is appropriate and what is inappropriate behavior when online. We want students to write. We want ELL students to be able to express themselves in the English language. A great tool for this is blogging. It takes writing to the next level. It gives students a global audience. It allows them to get feedback from numerous sources. A great tool for this is Blogger. A lot of schools are going to Google Apps. This is administered by Google. It's easy to set up. It's easy to monitor. And kids can get great feedback on it. When students, especially ELL students, go through a quiet time where they're not comfortable speaking in class, blogging can be a great tool for them to express themselves in writing, communicate with the teacher and the rest of the class, and still get feedback. Twitter is one of the most popular social networks in the world right now. Educators are embracing it daily, increasing their personal learning networks, connecting with educators around the globe and finding new resources. And in today's schools, students should be logging into regular social networks in order to learn how to act appropriately on social networks, but also to communicate and to write. Twitter is essentially microblogging in 140-character snippets. For students who struggle to write at length on a blog post, Twitter enables them to deliver short bursts of information and in some ways have to be really creative in doing so. This could be a great way for a class to discuss topics, to share pictures, to share information, and to connect with other classrooms around the globe. Google Apps for Education is free for schools. Schools are adopting it left and right. There are a lot of translation tools for students who don't speak English. There are tools for kids who aren't comfortable typing and have voice commands. But at the heart of Google Apps is an extreme ability for a teacher and a student to communicate, to give feedback, and to ramp up the speed at which teachers can aid students and really provide one-on-one assistance. Audio and video tools have come such a long way. With mobile technology, in the palm of your hand, you can create a podcast. You can communicate via voice messages with people around the world. And these seem to be a great area for ELL students and foreign language students. Voxer is a walkie-talkie-like app. You can communicate one-on-one via text, via voice message, and you can include pictures. I've worked with foreign language teachers to create classroom groups in which they assign students homework at night, and the students have to respond in the foreign language to the teacher. If a student isn't comfortable speaking in front of class, this is a great way for a student to be able to communicate, to hear the language, and to practice the language. This can work really well with foreign language students, even with music. Puppet EDU is the tool that I'm using to make this presentation right now. Lots of students are really introverted and shy, especially within ELL populations. Student presentations have been a long-standing assignment in lots of classes. But lots of students don't gain very much from having to be forced to stand in front of a class and deliver an oral presentation. When a student's not comfortable with their language or not comfortable in front of a large group, a great option is for them to use technology to create a presentation that only the teacher has to view. The student can still practice their speech. They can recite it, perform it. They can do it over. And they're still gaining the benefit of performing the language, performing that presentation, just for a different audience. Social bookmarking is a really cool idea. It allows students to research the web, find different areas, group them in various ways. My favorite bookmarking app is called OneTab. It's a simple Chrome extension. It saves all of your tabs, helps your computer perform better. You can save groups of tabs, you can name them, you can share them with other people. I think it's a great way for students to be able to complete research. And in our day and age, students need to be able to navigate the web and really tell the difference between fact and fiction. And every teacher should be doing this as part of their job with kids as they're on the internet. I spoke to a colleague today, and I told her, the longer I've been in education, the more I realize I don't know. We come to school, we come to this profession thinking one thing. We bring our own experience as we were students and our own experience from what we've learned to be a teacher. And we meet student after student and learn that each student is bringing their own problems, their own talents, their own personality to that classroom. It's important for us to really consider what is most important, what is most relevant to each student and how they will learn and how they will benefit. A huge part of that is culture and what those students are going through at home, what is important to them, how they interact with their parents, what they understand from their short time on earth when they've come to us. We need to do this one child at a time. We need to focus on the learning process, on the learner, not on tests, not on grades, and not even on technology. We need to focus on what is culture, what are the differences, what is language, and how is it best learned, and how can technology help those things. If we focus on all of those in helping us to reach each child where they are, then we'll be successful. I look forward to learning with you over the next semester, and I hope you've enjoyed this presentation. Thank you.